What if I told you it's not money that takes time to arrive? It's you who takes time to allow it. That might sound strange at first, but think about it. How many times have you tried to manifest wealth, attract money, apply the law of attraction, and still nothing truly big happened? Small amounts show up, little opportunities appear, but when it comes to real money, life-changing money, it feels like there's an invisible barrier. And it's not because you're not trying. It's not because you don't want it, and it's definitely not because you're doing nothing. The problem is something deeper, something most people never even notice. You've been conditioned to believe that big money takes time, that wealth is slow, that financial success requires years of effort and struggle. And without realizing it, you started manifesting exactly that. Time, waiting, delays. But here's the truth almost no one tells you. The universe doesn't respond to time. It responds to state. And as long as you keep trying to attract money from a place of need, doubt, or anxious expectation, you're actually pushing it away, because manifestation isn't about asking, it's about becoming. It's not about repeating empty affirmations. It's about stepping into an identity where money already exists in your reality. And that's exactly why some people can attract large sums in a single day, while others spend years trying and stay stuck in the same place. It's not luck. It's not coincidence. It's alignment. There is a very specific point where your thoughts, your emotions, and your expectations move in the same direction. And when that happens, your financial flow begins to shift. Fast. But that point isn't obvious. And most people miss it. They keep trying to control the how, watching the when, doubting in the middle of the process. And without realizing it, they interrupt their own manifestation before it even has a chance to build momentum. And maybe this has already happened to you. Maybe you felt, for a brief moment, that something was about to change, that money was coming, that an opportunity was close. And then suddenly, you slipped back into the same old pattern, the same doubt, the same hesitation, and everything seemed to disappear. But what you didn't realize is that in that brief moment, you were closer than you think. Much closer than you think, because there is a shift, one internal adjustment, that completely changes the way money responds to you. And no, it's not complicated. In fact, it's so simple. Most people overlook it, but before you understand exactly what that shift is, you need to see something that's happening right now inside you, without you even noticing. And the moment you become aware of it, everything starts to change, because awareness is where manifestation truly begins. Not when you repeat something, not when you hope, but when you see the pattern that has been controlling your results all along. And right now, as you're listening to this, there's a part of you recognizing it. Maybe quietly, maybe intensely, but something is clicking. That feeling you've had before, that sense that money could come faster, that things don't have to be this slow, that you're closer than your current reality suggests. That feeling is not random. It's a signal. And if you've ever felt that, like you were just one shift away from changing everything, go ahead and comment below. I felt this before, not for me, but for you. Because when you put it into words, you make it real. You stop ignoring it. You stop pushing it aside like just another thought. And if this message is already opening your mind in a different way, if it's making you question what you believed about money, time, and manifestation, take a second to like this video. That simple action helps this kind of message reach more people who are stuck in the same cycle. People who are ready to see things differently but just haven't been exposed to it yet. And if you want to go deeper into this, if you want to start understanding how to truly align your mind with wealth, abundance, and financial flow, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, because what we're about to get into next is where things start to shift for real. And you don't want to miss what comes next. So let's start with something that might completely shift the way you've been thinking about money your entire life. What if the reason you haven't attracted large amounts yet has nothing to do with time, and everything to do with the state you're operating from right now? Because most people are obsessed with when money is going to arrive. They look at the clock, the calendar, their current situation, and they measure everything through time. It's taking too long. Maybe it will happen next month. I need more time. And without realizing it, they're reinforcing the very delay they're trying to escape. But manifestation doesn't respond to time the way you've been taught. The law of attraction, the law of assumption, the entire mechanism behind attracting wealth and abundance. It doesn't care about hours, days, or years. It responds to identity, to emotional state, to the version of you that is thinking, feeling, and expecting. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Because if large sums of money haven't entered your life yet, it's not because they're far away. It's because your current state doesn't recognize them as normal. Think about it honestly. If, right now, a large amount of money appeared in your life, something significantly bigger than what you're used to, would it feel natural, or would it feel shocking, overwhelming, maybe maybe even a little unbelievable. That reaction right there is everything. Because money doesn't just enter your life randomly. It aligns with what your mind has already accepted as possible, safe, and familiar. So when you try to manifest something big while internally feeling like it's too much, too fast, or too unlikely, you create resistance, and that resistance doesn't always feel obvious. Sometimes it shows up as overthinking, sometimes as doubt, sometimes as the need to constantly check if it's working, and all of that slows everything down. This is why smaller amounts tend to come easier, because they don't challenge your identity, they don't disrupt your internal sense of what's normal. But the moment you aim for something bigger, something that would actually change your financial reality, your mind reacts. It questions. It analyzes. It tries to make sense of it. And in doing that, it pulls you out of the state required to manifest it quickly. So when people say you can attract large sums in one day, most listeners immediately think it's unrealistic, not because it's impossible, but because it doesn't match their internal baseline. And that's the real barrier. Not time. Not opportunity, not even effort, just a mismatch between what you're trying to attract and what you're prepared to receive. Now here's the part most people never stop to consider. If your state is what determines your results, then technically, the moment your state changes, your results can change just as fast, which means the idea of attracting a large amount of money in one day isn't about speeding up time. It's about removing the internal delay. It's about collapsing the gap between who you are now and the version of you for whom that level of wealth is already normal. And when that gap closes, things don't feel like they're taking time anymore, they feel like they're responding. But closing that gap isn't about forcing belief or pretending. It's about recognizing the subtle ways you keep yourself in the same state, even when you're trying to change. The thoughts you repeat. The emotions you return to, the expectations you unconsciously hold. Because even when you say you want fast manifestation, your internal patterns might still be wired for slow results. And until that's exposed, you'll keep recreating the same timeline. So before we talk about what to do, you need to see clearly what's been happening underneath everything you've tried so far. And once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. If this is already making you realize that maybe time was never the real problem, you can drop a comment like "it's my state" just to anchor that awareness, because what you're about to understand next goes even deeper into why your financial flow hasn't matched your true potential yet. And once you start to see that it's your state, not time, that shapes your results, something else becomes impossible to ignore: the quiet, almost invisible ways you've been blocking the very money you say you want. Because here's the truth most people never confront. You don't just fail to attract large amounts of money. You actively reject them without even realizing it, not consciously, but internally. It shows up in subtle thoughts you've normalized for years. That's too much. That kind of money isn't for people like me. I wouldn't even know what to do with that. That would be crazy if it happened that fast. And the moment those thoughts appear, even for a second, your entire manifestation process shifts, because the law of attraction doesn't just respond to what you say you want. It responds to what you feel is true. So you might be affirming wealth, repeating manifestation techniques, visualizing abundance, but underneath all of that, there's a deeper layer quietly deciding what's allowed, and that layer is shaped by your past. By what you've seen growing up. By how money was talked about around you. By what you've experienced so far. If your reality has always been built around smaller amounts, stable but limited flows, then your mind creates a kind of invisible ceiling, a financial identity, a range that feels normal, and anything outside of that range, especially something bigger, faster, more abundant, feels unfamiliar. And what does the mind do with unfamiliar things? It resists them, not because it's trying to hurt you, but because it's trying to protect what it already knows. This is why people sabotage their own manifestation, not in obvious ways, but in micro-moments. They get an idea and dismiss it, they feel inspired and hesitate. They sense an opportunity and overthink it. And then they say, nothing is happening, but something was happening. They just didn't allow it to continue. And when it comes to attracting large sums of money quickly, this pattern becomes even stronger. Because now it's not just about money, it's about identity expansion. It's about becoming someone who can receive, hold, and move with bigger financial energy. And that can feel uncomfortable at first. Not because it's wrong, but because it's new. Think about it like this: if you've been used to operating at a certain level, emotionally, mentally, immediately, financially, and suddenly you try to jump into a completely different level overnight. Your system reacts. It tries to pull you back to what's known, back to what feels safe, back to what feels predictable, and this is where most people lose the manifestation, not because it wasn't working, but because they unconsciously returned to their old state. They start checking again, doubting again, questioning again, and every time they do that, they reinforce the old identity. So instead of expanding into a new financial reality, they shrink back into the old one, and the cycle repeats. This is what creates the illusion that big money takes time, but it's not time. It's resistance. It's the gap between what you want and what you actually allow yourself to receive. And until that gap is addressed, no technique, no affirmation, no external action will fully break the pattern, because the block isn't outside. It's internal. It's in the way you interpret possibility. In the way you react to opportunity. In the way you emotionally respond to the idea of having more. And the moment you start to notice these patterns, not judge them, not fight them, just see them clearly, something begins to shift. You stop reacting automatically. You start catching yourself in real time. You notice the exact moment where you would normally doubt. And instead of going deeper into that doubt, you pause. And that pause, that small interruption, is where your power begins to return, because now you're no longer operating on autopilot. You're choosing what to believe, choosing what to accept, choosing what kind of financial reality you're willing to step into. And this is where things start to open up, not in a dramatic, instant explosion, but in a quiet, controlled expansion. Where the idea of receiving more doesn't feel impossible anymore. It starts to feel accessible, and once something feels accessible, it's only a matter of alignment before it becomes real. If this is making you realize that maybe you've been limiting how much money you allow into your life, you can comment something like, "I remove my limits," just to anchor that shift, because what comes next is where we start to actively change that internal ceiling and move into a completely different level of financial flow. And once you begin to notice those internal limits, something powerful happens, because now you're no longer just reacting to your financial reality. You're starting to reshape it from the inside. But this is where most people expect some complex technique, some long manifestation ritual, something that feels like effort. And what I'm about to show you is the opposite. The shift that allows you to attract large sums of money quickly doesn't come from doing more. It comes from adjusting how you relate to money in real time. Because right now, whether you realize it or not, you have a relationship with money. You respond to it emotionally, you assign meaning to it, you interpret situations through it. And that relationship determines how money responds to you. So if money feels distant, difficult, slow, or conditional, that's exactly how it will show up. But if money starts to feel available, responsive, aligned with you, the entire dynamic changes. And this is where the adjustment begins, not with force, not with repetition, but with a simple internal shift that most people overlook. Instead of trying to get money, you start operating as someone who already has access to it. Feel the difference. Trying to get money carries tension, effort, distance, but having access to money carries certainty, calm, openness, and your mind reacts differently to each one. When you try to get something, you reinforce the idea that it's not here yet, but when you operate from access, you remove that gap. And this is exactly the state where manifestation accelerates, because now you're not chasing wealth, you're aligning with it. You're not asking, you're allowing. And one of the fastest ways to stabilize this state is through a very specific kind of command, not a desperate affirmation, but a grounded declaration, something simple but precise. Something like, "Money is available to me now." Notice how that feels. It doesn't beg. It doesn't force. It doesn't try to convince. It states. And that's important, because the subconscious mind doesn't respond to desperation, it responds to clarity. So instead of repeating endless affirmations hoping something clicks, you introduce a command that aligns your perception instantly. And then, this is the key, you live from it. You move through your day with the assumption that money is already accessible. You stop reacting as if it's far away. You stop shrinking your expectations. You start thinking, deciding, and even noticing opportunities differently. And this is where the shift becomes visible, not because money magically appears out of nowhere, but because because your awareness expands. You begin to see options you didn't see before. You feel guided toward actions that make sense. You respond to situations with more confidence and less hesitation. And these small changes create momentum. Because manifestation isn't just about something appearing instantly. It's about entering a flow where everything starts to align, and when that flow begins, things can move very fast. Faster than you're used to, but only if you don't interrupt it. And this is where most people still struggle, because even after accessing this new state, they unconsciously return to the old one. They say the command, feel the shift, and then a few minutes later, they check their reality again. They look for proof, they question if it's working, and in that moment, they disconnect, because the state of having access is replaced by the state of waiting again, and that's all it takes to slow everything down. So the real power isn't just in saying the command, it's in sustaining the identity that comes with it, holding that calm certainty, that quiet knowing, that sense that something is already in motion, even if you can't see it yet. And when you stay in that, without forcing, without rushing, without doubting, something begins to organize around you. Situations start to line up. Timing begins to shift. Opportunities feel more natural, less forced. And instead of chasing money, you start noticing it moving toward you. Not always in obvious ways at first, but in signals. In patterns. In small confirmations that something has changed. And the more you trust that, the stronger it becomes, the more consistent your state, the faster the response. And this is where attracting large sums in a short time stops feeling impossible and starts feeling like a natural extension of how you operate. But there's still one critical point that determines whether this momentum builds or disappears completely, and most people don't even realize they're doing it until it's too late. If this is making you feel that shift, that sense that money might not be as far as you thought, you can comment something like, I have access now, just to anchor that state, because what we're about to uncover next is the exact behavior that silently cancels this entire process, even when everything was starting to align. And this is exactly where everything either accelerates or quietly collapses without you even noticing, because after you access that state, after you feel that alignment, after you begin to operate from the idea that money is available to you now, there's one behavior that almost everyone falls back into, and it seems harmless. It feels natural, but it cancels everything you check, not just physically, but mentally. You start scanning your reality again, looking for signs, looking for confirmation, looking for proof that the manifestation is already happening. And the moment you do that, something subtle shifts inside you. You move from certainty back into evaluation. From alignment back into doubt, from it's already in motion to is it working yet? And that question, that tiny shift in perception, is enough to interrupt the entire flow, because when you check, you're no longer in the state of having access, you're back in the state of waiting, and waiting carries a completely different frequency. It carries lack. It carries distance. It reinforces the idea that what you want is still not here. And manifestation responds to that immediately, not because something external changed, but because you changed, your state changed, your identity shifted back to the old pattern, the one that needs proof before it believes. And this is why so many people say they were so close. They felt it, they sensed it, they even saw small signs starting to appear, and then suddenly everything slowed down again. But it didn't slow down randomly. It was interrupted by a thought, by a reaction, by that moment of checking. And the more important the manifestation feels to you, the more tempting it becomes to check, because you care, because you want it, because you're emotionally invested. But that's exactly the trap, because urgency, when it turns into pressure, pulls you out of alignment. So the key isn't to stop caring. It's to stop monitoring. To stop treating manifestation like something that needs constant validation, because the moment you require proof, you disconnect from the state that creates it. Think about it like this: if you truly had access to money, if you genuinely knew that it was already responding to you, would you be checking every few minutes? Or would you move differently? Would you feel calmer, more certain, less reactive? That's the state. That's the version of you that allows large sums to flow in faster, because there's no resistance interrupting the process. So instead of checking, you hold. You hold the assumption. You hold the identity. You hold the feeling that something is already unfolding. And when doubts try to come back, because they will, you don't fight them. You don't panic. You simply don't follow them. You notice and return. Back to that calm certainty, back to that internal stability, back to the version of you that already has access. And this is where discipline becomes invisible, not in forcing belief, but in not abandoning it, because most people don't fail at manifestation because they do it wrong. They fail because they don't stay. They visit the state, but they don't live in it. They touch alignment, but they don't sustain it. And without consistency, frequency. The signal keeps breaking over and over again. But when you finally understand this, when you see how often you've been interrupting your own financial flow, something changes. You become more aware in real time. You catch the exact moment where you would normally check. And instead, you pause, and that pause is everything, because in that pause, you choose not to go back. You choose to stay aligned. You choose to remain in the state that actually attracts what you want. And the longer you stay there, the more stable it becomes, the more natural it feels, until eventually, it's no longer something you're trying to maintain. It's just how you operate, and when that happens, manifestation doesn't feel like effort anymore. It feels like response, like something is adjusting to you, organizing around you, matching your internal state in ways that start to feel almost precise. And this is where things begin to move differently, faster, more directly, more consistently, but only if you don't break it again in that same old way, the way that most people never even realize they're doing. If this made you recognize how often you've been checking and interrupting your own manifestation, you can comment something like, "I don't check, I trust," just to anchor that awareness, because what comes next is where you turn this understanding into a consistent pattern that starts reflecting in your reality. And if you made it all the way to this point, if you stayed, listened, and actually felt something shift inside you, then you already know this wasn't just information, this was awareness. And awareness is where everything begins to change. Most people never get here. They hear about manifestation, wealth, the law of attraction, but they never truly see what's been holding them back. They keep repeating the same patterns, the same doubts, the same delays, but you didn't skip, you didn't scroll away, you stayed, and that already says something about you. So if this message resonated with you, even a little, go down to the comments right now and type, "I allow large sums now," not as a habit, but as a decision, a declaration that you are no longer operating from limitation, but from alignment. And if you want to keep building this mindset, if you want to train your mind to naturally attract money, wealth, and abundance without constantly falling back into old patterns, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because this is just the beginning. And the more you immerse yourself in this kind of thinking, the more it becomes your default state. Also, take a second to like this video, not just to support the channel, but to push this message out to someone else who is stuck in that same cycle of waiting, doubting, and checking. Someone who needs to hear this, even if they don't know it yet. And right now, there's a video on your screen. That's your next step, because what you just unlocked only grows if you keep going, if you reinforce it, if you stay in this state a little longer. So don't break it now. Click on the next video and keep moving forward.